kept writing letters to his wife every morning. She stopped reading them 4 months before she left. The stack on the counter held 47 unopened envelopes. Maybe love isn't what we say. It's what we're too afraid to. What have you left unspoken until it was too late? The pen scratches across paper like something trying to escape. Elias writes in the kind of morning light that makes dust look holy. It comes through the kitchen window at an angle, soft and tired, catching on glass that hasn't been cleaned in months. The smudges blur the outside world just enough that he doesn't have to look at it directly. He prefers it that way now. The letter begins the way they all do. I still see you in everything. His hand hesitates over her name, just for a second, long enough to notice. Not long enough to stop. Vera. He writes it carefully, the way you write something fragile. The ink bleeds slightly into the cheap paper, the kind that comes in packs of 200 from the grocery store. He's gone through 3 packs already, maybe 4. He stopped counting somewhere around February. The wooden desk is worn smooth under his palms. 30 years of morning coffee and bills and birthday cards have sanded it down to a texture that feels like memory. He runs his thumb along the edge while he thinks about what to say next. The grain catches under his nail, a splinter that never quite healed. He tells her about the birds. There's a cardinal that comes to the feeder every morning just after 6. It sits on the branch closest to the house and tilts its head like it's listening for something. Elias thinks maybe it's the same one from last year. He can't be sure, but he wants it to be. He always said cardinals were good luck. The house is quiet in the way that houses get when only one person lives in them. Not silent, just waiting. The refrigerator hums in the corner. The clock in the hallway ticks with the kind of patience that makes time feel cruel. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard settles. The sound of a house remembering what it used to hold. He folds the letter into thirds, slides it into an envelope, writes her name on the front in the same careful script. Vera Cartwright. No address, no stamp. He doesn't need them anymore. The stack sits on the counter beside the coffee maker. 47 letters, held together with a rubber band that's starting to lose its grip. Each one addressed. Each one sealed. None of them opened. He adds this morning's letter to the top. Adjusts the rubber band. The stack leans slightly to the left now, like a tower built by someone who doesn't quite believe in foundations anymore. One of the envelopes near the bottom has a water stain. A soft brown bloom that spreads across the corner, blurring her name into something unreadable. He doesn't remember if it was tears or coffee. Both feel true. Elias makes himself a cup now. Black, no sugar. The smell fills the kitchen, rich and bitter and familiar. It's the only thing in the house that still smells like it used to. He wraps both hands around the mug and feels the heat seep into his palms, holds it there until it almost burns. Outside, the cardinal leaves. He watches it go, a flash of red against gray sky. Gone before he can convince himself it mattered. The light shifts. Morning crawls forward. The desk waits for tomorrow. He'll write again, then. He always does. Because writing to her is the only way he still knows how to say, I'm here. Even if she isn't listening. Even if she stopped listening 4 months ago. Even if the letters pile up like evidence of something he can't name yet. The stack leans a little further left. He doesn't straighten it. 6 months earlier, the light came through the same window differently. Brighter then. Cleaner. The kind of afternoon sun that makes everything look like it's been forgiven. Elias stood at the counter, slicing tomatoes for a salad neither of them had asked for. The knife made soft sounds against the cutting board. Vera folded laundry at the kitchen table. Her hands moved with the kind of precision that comes from doing something 10,000 times. Fold the sleeves in. Smooth the front. Stack it on the pile. She didn't look up. Didn't hum the way she used to when her hands were busy. He told her about his day. Something small. A customer at the hardware store who'd asked for advice about fixing a fence and ended up talking for 20 minutes about his daughter's wedding. Elias had listened, nodded in the right places, sold him the wrong kind of nails by accident, but the man didn't seem to notice. Vera smiled, but her eyes stayed on the shirt in her hands. A blue one. His. She folded it the same way she always did, sleeves tucked in like something that needed to be contained. He noticed. Of course he noticed, but he didn't say anything, because saying something would mean admitting there was something to say. And maybe if he didn't name it, it wouldn't be real yet. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, the same hum as now, the same patient, indifferent sound that fills a room when no one else does. She set the shirt on the pile, reached for another. A towel this time, white, soft. It smelled like lavender detergent, faint and comforting, the kind of smell that's supposed to mean home. Elias kept slicing tomatoes. The silence wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was just there, sitting between them like a third person at the table, someone they'd both learned to make room for without ever deciding to. He wanted to ask her what she was thinking. He didn't. That night, he couldn't sleep. Vera was already asleep beside him, or pretending to be. He couldn't tell anymore. Her breathing was steady, even, the kind of rhythm that used to comfort him. Now it just made him feel further away. He got up, went downstairs, sat at the desk in the kitchen and turned on the small lamp in the corner. The light felt too bright, too honest. He almost turned it off. Instead, he found a piece of paper. Just one page, lined. From the notepad they kept by the phone for grocery lists and reminders that never got remembered, he wrote her name at the top. Vera. Then he sat there for a long time, pen hovering, trying to find the shape of what he wanted to say. It came slowly. One sentence. Then another. I think we've forgotten how to say the small things out loud. He paused. I miss hearing your voice when it's not answering a question. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know when we stopped talking, but I think we did. He folded the letter before he could cross anything out, before he could decide it was too much or not enough. He carried it upstairs and left it on her pillow, the side she slept on, the side that still smelled like her shampoo, something floral he could never name. Then he went back downstairs and waited. Morning came the way it always does, slow, inevitable. He heard her footsteps above him, the creak of the bed, the sound of the bathroom door closing, water running. When she came down, she didn't mention the letter. She made coffee, poured 2 cups, set one in front of him without a word. Her face was calm, unreadable. She took her cup to the table and sat with her phone, scrolling through something that didn't seem to matter. He didn't ask if she'd read it. But later, when he went upstairs to change, he saw the letter on her nightstand, folded, not hidden, just there, resting beside a glass of water and a book she hadn't opened in weeks. She'd kept it. That should have felt like something. Maybe it was, but she didn't say anything, and he didn't know how to ask. So that night, he wrote another one. The letters became daily bread. Every morning, before the lights settled, before the coffee finished brewing, Elias sat at the desk and wrote. Not because he believed anymore, because stopping felt like a different kind of ending, one he wasn't ready to name. He wrote about the birds, 3 sparrows on the feeder this morning. Yesterday it was 5. He told Vera they seemed nervous, always looking over their shoulders, like they knew winter was coming, even though the air still held September's warmth. He wrote about the light, how it hit the porch railing at 4 in the afternoon and turned everything gold, how it reminded him of the way her hair used to catch the sun when they were younger, back when she laughed at things that weren't funny just because he thought they were. He wrote about dreams, the one where she was 23 again, sitting on the hood of his truck in a parking lot somewhere he couldn't remember, her feet bare, her voice clear. She'd been telling him something important, but he woke up before he could hear what it was. The handwriting got messier, not all at once, slowly, the way everything falls apart when you stop paying attention. Letters slanted, words crowded together. Ink smudged where his hand dragged across the page. He didn't notice until he looked back at the early ones and saw how careful they used to be. A callus formed on his middle finger, small, hard, the kind that comes from gripping something too tight for too long. He pressed his thumb against it sometimes while he thought about what to write next. It didn't hurt. It just reminded him he was still doing this. The clock in the hallway kept ticking, the same in different rhythm. Seconds into minutes, into hours, into days that all felt the same. Time moved, but nothing changed. He wrote. The stack grew. Vera didn't come downstairs until he was already finished. She stopped keeping the letters on her nightstand. He didn't know when that happened either. One day they were there. The next they weren't. He didn't ask. She didn't explain. The envelopes started piling up on the counter instead. 1 became 2. 2 became 7. 7 became 20. The rubber band barely held them together anymore. He wrote about things that didn't matter because the things that did felt too big to fit on paper. How do you write, "I'm losing you" when she's still in the next room? How do you say, "I don't know who we are anymore" without making it real? So he wrote about birds and light and dreams instead. He wrote to the version of Vera he remembered, the one who used to hum while folding laundry, the one who left notes in his lunch that said things like, "Don't forget you're loved," the one who existed somewhere between memory and myth now, not the woman who moved through the house like a guest, not the one whose silence felt louder than anything she could say. The woman upstairs wasn't the one he was writing to anymore. Maybe she never had been. Noah came by on a Thursday. She didn't call first. Just showed up with groceries she said she'd bought too much of. Eggs, bread, apples that were already starting to bruise. She set them on the counter and her eyes landed on the stack. She didn't say anything. Didn't ask what they were, or why there were so many, or why none of them had been opened. She just looked at them, then at him, then back at the groceries like she was trying to decide which silence was safer. Elias wanted to explain. He didn't, because explaining would mean admitting he didn't know why he was still doing this, that the letters had stopped being about Vera and started being about him, about proving something. To who, he wasn't sure. Noah put the eggs in the fridge, folded the paper bag, set it under the sink with the others they never threw away. Her face said everything her mouth didn't. Not anger, not even disappointment. Something worse. The look you give someone when you realize they're further gone than you thought. When you understand that helping means watching them figure it out themselves. She hugged him before she left, longer than usual, her arms tight around his shoulders. She smelled like the same lavender detergent Vera used to use. He wondered if she knew, if she did it on purpose or if it was just coincidence. After she left, he wrote another letter. This one? Shorter. Only 3 lines. I think I'm writing to a ghost, but I don't know how to stop. And I don't know what happens if I do. He folded it, added it to the stack. The rubber band snapped. Not dramatically, just a quiet little pop. The kind of sound that should mean nothing, but somehow means everything. The letters spilled across the counter. 47 envelopes. Each one a version of the same prayer. Each one unanswered. He didn't pick them up right away. He just stood there, staring at them. The evidence of something he couldn't name yet. The clock kept ticking. The light kept fading. And somewhere upstairs, Vera didn't make a sound. Noah came back the next morning. She brought tea this time. The kind their mother used to make. Chamomile with honey. She set 2 mugs on the table, even though she knew he wouldn't drink his. The steam rose between them like something trying to say what they couldn't. Elias gathered the letters from where they'd spilled. 47 envelopes scattered across the counter like evidence at a crime scene. He stacked them carefully, one on top of the other, building the tower back up, even though the rubber band was gone. Noah watched him, her hands wrapped around her mug, but she didn't lift it, just held it. The warmth bleeding into her palms, her eyes stayed on the letters, on him, on the space between what was happening and what needed to be said. She took a breath. "Dad!" He kept stacking. "Mom isn't coming back." The words landed soft, not cruel, just true. The kind of truth that doesn't need volume to break something open. Elias didn't look up. His hands paused over the stack. One envelope half-placed, suspended. He knew. Of course he knew. He'd known since the day Vera packed 2 suitcases and told him she needed space. Space to think, space to breathe, space that turned into 1 week, then 2, then 3 months. She'd moved in with her sister, 2 towns over, close enough to come back if she wanted to, far enough that she didn't have to. He still wrote to the house, not to her sister's address, not to wherever Vera actually was, to here, to the place where they'd built 32 years, where they'd painted the kitchen 3 different colors before settling on the one that felt like home, where they'd raised Noah, where Vera's coffee mug still sat in the cabinet, even though she hadn't used it in months. He wrote to the place because he didn't know how to write to the person anymore. The letters piled up because there was no one here to receive them. And maybe that was the point. Maybe he wasn't writing to Vera at all. Maybe he was writing proof. Proof that he was still here, still feeling, still trying to hold on to something that had already let go. Noah's voice came quieter this time. "She's not reading them, Dad." He finally looked up. His daughter's face held the kind of sadness that comes from watching someone you love refuse to surface. Not anger, not frustration, just a deep, tired ache. The kind children carry when they realize their parents are just people. Fragile, confused, capable of breaking in ways that don't make sense. "I know," Elias said. His voice sounded strange, like he hadn't used it in days. Maybe he hadn't. Not for anything that mattered. Then why? Because I don't know what else to do. The chair creaked when he shifted his weight. The sound filled the silence. Outside, the feeder hung empty. No cardinal, no sparrows, just the swing of the feeder in the wind. Back and forth, going nowhere. Noah reached across the table. Her hand covered his, warm, steady. The way Vera's used to be, before the warmth started feeling like obligation. Before steady started feeling like distant. "You can stop," she said. "It's okay to stop." But he couldn't, because stopping meant admitting the letters were pointless, that the last 4 months had been an exercise in talking to air, that love, when left unwitnessed, just evaporates, becomes something you can't prove existed at all. He tasted his coffee, cold now, bitter. He'd poured it hours ago and forgotten. The way he forgot most things these days. What day it was, whether he'd eaten, the difference between memory and hope. Noah stayed until the light changed, until the kitchen filled with the kind of shadows that make everything look older than it is. She washed both mugs even though neither of them had drunk much. She folded the dish towel the way Vera used to, sleeves tucked in, edges aligned. Before she left, she hugged him again. This time it felt like goodbye, not to her, to something else, to the version of him that still believed writing letters could make someone stay. After the door closed, Elias sat at the desk. The blank page stared back at him, accusing, waiting, daring him to prove Noah wrong. He picked up the pen. The callus on his middle finger pressed into the grip. Familiar. Almost comforting now. He wrote Vera's name at the top, then stopped. What do you say to someone who isn't listening? What do you say when you finally admit you're only talking to yourself? He wrote 3 lines, shorter than usual, the truth distilled. I know you won't read this, but I had to say it anyway. I don't know how to stop loving you out loud. He folded the letter, added it to the stack. 48 now. The tower leaned left, unstable. One wrong breath and it would fall. He didn't straighten it. Outside, the wind picked up. The feeder swung harder, still empty. The cardinal never came back. That night, Elias opened the oldest letters, not the ones from this week or last month. The ones from the beginning, when the stack was still small, when he still believed the paper could carry what his voice couldn't. He spread them across the desk, 48 envelopes, a timeline of everything he'd failed to say out loud. The lamplight cast long shadows across the words, yellow and soft, the kind of light that makes old things look even older. He read slowly, one letter, then another, pages turning with the deliberate sound of something fragile being handled. I'm sorry I didn't notice you were fading. Thank you for the way you folded my shirts, even when I never said it mattered. I think I forgot how to ask you about your day without it sounding like an obligation. Apologies, gratitude, confessions. All the things he should have said when she was sitting across from him at breakfast, when she was folding laundry in the kitchen, when she was still close enough to hear. But he'd stayed silent, because his father had stayed silent, because Rowan had taught him, without ever saying it, that love was something you showed through presence, not words. That being there was enough. That emotions didn't need voices as long as you kept showing up. Rowan had spent 40 years married to a woman he rarely spoke to about anything that mattered. He'd sent birthday cards with generic messages. Thinking of you. Hope you're well. Words so empty they could have been written to anyone. Elias had watched that, absorbed it, learned that silence was safer than risk, that you could love someone deeply and never tell them how or why. And when Rowan died, the only thing left behind was a box of those cards. No letters explaining who he'd been. No confessions about what he'd felt. Just decades of surface kindness that never broke through to truth. Elias had inherited that silence. He'd given Vera 32 years of presence, of showing up, of being reliable and steady and there. But he'd never told her she was the reason mornings felt like something worth waking up for. Never said he was afraid of becoming invisible. Never admitted he didn't know how to ask for help when the weight got too heavy. He'd waited until she was already gone to start saying those things. And by then, it was just noise in an empty room. The letters weren't the problem. They were evidence, a record of everything he should have said when it could still change something. When her eyes were still looking at him, instead of past him. He picked up one from February. I miss the sound of your voice when you're not answering a question. Just talking. About nothing. About everything. He'd written that 3 months after she left. But he'd felt it for years. Maybe love isn't what we say. Maybe it's what we're brave enough to admit we didn't. If you've ever kept writing to someone who stopped listening, stay. The texture of the old paper felt soft under his fingers. Fragile. Like it might disintegrate if he held it too long. The edges were worn from being folded and unfolded, from being kept but never opened, from meaning something to him, even if they meant nothing to her. He set the letters down. The stack didn't look like devotion anymore. It looked like failure. A monument to every moment he chose silence over honesty. Every time he thought, I'll say it later, and later never came. The clock had stopped ticking at some point. He hadn't noticed when. The house felt different without that sound. Quieter. More honest, maybe. Like it had finally stopped pretending time was moving forward. Elias pulled out a fresh piece of paper. This letter would be different. Not because she'd read it. She wouldn't. But because he needed to write the truth. Not another version of the truth that felt safer. He wrote to the silence itself. To the years he spent believing presence could replace words. To the inheritance he'd accepted without questioning. To the man he'd become by accident. I gave you everything except honesty. I showed up every day but never showed you who I was when no one was watching. I loved you the way my father loved my mother. Quietly, carefully, from a distance that felt like safety but was just fear. I'm not writing this because I think you'll come back. I'm writing it because I need to stop pretending the letters were for you. They were always for me. Proof I was still capable of feeling something. Proof I hadn't disappeared completely. He folded the letter. But this time he didn't add it to the stack. He held it, feeling the weight of it, the way paper can carry more than ink, the way some truths don't need destinations, just witnesses. Outside, the wind had stopped. The feeder hung still. The world felt paused, waiting for him to decide what came next. He thought about his father, about the box of birthday cards that said nothing, about the silence Rowan had carried to his grave. Elias didn't want that. He didn't want Noah to find 48 letters and wonder why her father never learned to speak when it mattered. Why he chose paper over presence. Why he built a monument to absence instead of showing up when there was still time. The letter in his hands felt different than the others. Heavier, truer, like it had cost something to write. He set it on the desk, not on the stack, beside it, a different category, a different kind of confession. Tomorrow he'd write another one, but not to Vera, to himself, to the silence he'd inherited and the one he was choosing to break. The lamplight flickered once, then held. The shadows didn't feel as long anymore. Elias left the house before he could talk himself out of it. One letter, not 48, just the one that mattered. The drive took 30 minutes, 2 towns over, streets he used to know when Vera's sister hosted holiday dinners and summer barbecues. Back when family gatherings felt like belonging instead of obligation. He didn't call ahead. Calling would have given him time to turn around. Time to decide this was a mistake. Time to convince himself that some truths are better left unspoken. The sky threatened to rain. Gray clouds pressed low, the kind of weather that makes everything feel closer than it is. He gripped the steering wheel with both hands. The letter sat on the passenger seat, folded into thirds. 3 pages. Everything he should have said when she was still listening. A cardinal crossed in front of the windshield, red against gray. Fast. Not landing. Just passing through. He watched it disappear into the trees. No feeder to return to. No reason to stay. Vera's sister's house looked smaller than he remembered. White siding. Black shutters. A porch with 2 chairs that didn't match. He parked at the curb. Sat there for a moment, engine off, hands still on the wheel. He could leave, drive home, put the letter back on the desk beside the others. Pretend this moment never tried to happen. But he didn't. He got out. The air smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. Fresh. Clean. The kind of smell that makes you think the world might start over if you let it. 3 steps to the porch, his heart loud enough to drown out everything else. He knocked. Footsteps inside. Slow. Hesitant. The door opened. Vera stood there. She looked the same. Different. Her hair shorter. Her eyes carrying a weight they didn't used to. Or maybe they always had and he'd just stopped looking. Neither of them spoke. The hum of distant traffic filled the space between them. Cars moving somewhere. People going places. The world continuing like it always does when your own feels like it's stopped. He held out the letter. She looked at it, then at him. Her hands stayed at her sides. "I'm not asking you to come back," he said. His voice sounded strange, like he was hearing it from outside himself. "I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to have this." Vera reached out, took the envelope, her fingers steady and uncertain at once. The way you hold something you're not sure you want, but can't refuse. She didn't open it, just held it, looked at him, back at the paper in her hands. "Is this another one?" she asked. Quiet, not angry, just tired. "No," Elias said. "It's the first one that's true." Her eyes met his, really met them, for the first time in months, maybe years, the kind of looking that doesn't turn away when it gets uncomfortable. "Why now?" she asked. He didn't have a good answer, not one that would make sense, not one that would change anything. "Because I spent 32 years showing up," he said. "But I never showed you who I was. I gave you presents, but I never gave you honesty." The rain started, light at first, barely there, just enough to darken the pavement and make the air smell like something washed clean. Vera glanced at the letter in her hands, then back at him. "I don't know if this changes anything," she said. "I know. I don't know if I can forgive all of it." "I know." She nodded, slow, like she was deciding something she couldn't say yet. "But I'll read it," she said. That was enough. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. The kind that says, "I see you tried," even if it's too late, even if it doesn't fix what broke. They stood there, rain falling between them, neither moving closer or further away. The letter in her hands wasn't his anymore. It was theirs. Whether she opened it tonight or next week or never, it existed between them now. Proof that he'd finally chosen, truth over safety. "Thank you," he said. For what, he wasn't sure. For taking it. For not slamming the door. For looking at him like he was still a person worth seeing. She didn't say anything back, just held the letter against her chest, protecting it from the rain, or from herself. He couldn't tell. Elias turned, walked back to the car. The rain soaked through his shirt, cold against his skin. He didn't hurry. When he reached the door, he looked back. Vera was still standing there, watching him, the letter still pressed against her chest. Their eyes met one more time, and for a second, it felt like the distance between them wasn't measured in towns or months or silences, just in the space between two people who used to know each other and were trying to remember how. He got in the car, started the engine. The windshield fogged. He wiped it with his sleeve, pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, Vera stood on the porch, the door still open behind her, the letter still in her hands. Then she turned, went inside. The door closed. The drive home felt shorter, lighter, like something he'd been carrying had finally been set down. When he walked into the kitchen, the stack of letters was still there. 47 envelopes. Each one a version of the same apology, but they didn't feel the same anymore. They felt like what they were. History. Evidence of a pattern he was choosing to break. He didn't throw them away, didn't burn them or hide them, just left them there. A monument to silence that didn't need to be repeated. The desk was empty now, the lamp off, the chair pushed in. He didn't sit down, didn't reach for paper or pen. Didn't write another letter, because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. And maybe that was the point. The next morning, Elias didn't sit at the desk. He stood in the doorway, looked at it, the lamp unplugged, the chair pushed in, dust already settling where the paper used to be. It felt strange, not wrong, just unfamiliar, like walking into a room that used to be yours and realizing it belongs to someone else now. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table instead, the same table where Vera used to fold laundry, where Noah had told him the truth he already knew, where 47 letters still sat in a leaning stack, held together by nothing. He didn't move them, didn't throw them away or hide them in a drawer, just left them there, evidence of something that had already ended. The house felt different, quieter, not the suffocating kind of quiet, the kind that comes after noise stops and you realize you can finally hear yourself think. Sunlight came through the window, clean, bright. It caught on the edge of his coffee mug and made small rainbows on the wall. He watched them shift as the steam rose. Tiny movements, almost nothing, but enough. Outside, birds gathered at the feeder. Not the cardinal, just sparrows, 6 or 7. They landed, ate, left. No ceremony, no meaning, just birds doing what birds do. He listened to them, the flutter of wings, the soft tap of beaks against metal. Sounds he'd stopped noticing years ago because he'd been too busy trying to make silence mean something. His hands rested in his lap, folded, still. He didn't know what to do with them anymore. For months they'd been busy, writing, folding, stacking, building monuments to things that couldn't be fixed with paper. Now they were just hands, quiet, purposeless, learning how to exist without a task. The clock in the hallway was still stopped. He'd never wound it again after it ran out. Time moved anyway. It always did, whether you marked it or not. Noah came by 3 days later. She didn't bring groceries this time, just herself. She sat across from him at the table, saw the empty desk through the doorway, saw the stack of letters still on the counter. "You okay?" she asked. He thought about it. Really thought about it. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. He was learning how to sit in the space between answers. How to exist without certainty. How to be okay with not being okay yet. Noah nodded, like she understood, or at least accepted. "Did she read it?" she asked. "I don't know," he said again. "Does it matter?" He thought about that too. "It used to," he said. "Now I think I just needed to say it, whether she heard it or not." Noah reached across the table, squeezed his hand, her grip warm, steady, the way Vera's used to be before the warmth started feeling like distance. "I'm proud of you," she said. He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, held her hand, let the silence sit between them without trying to fill it. After she left, he sat at the table for a long time. The light moved across the floor, slow, patient, the kind of movement you only notice when you're not looking for it. He thought about his father, about Rowan, about the box of birthday cards that said nothing real, about decades of presents without honesty, about the inheritance he'd accepted without realizing it was a choice. He thought about Vera, about 32 years of showing up, but never showing himself, about all the things he'd written that should have been spoken, about the silence that grew so slowly they didn't notice until it was louder than everything else. He thought about the letters, about the ritual, about the way he'd convinced himself that writing was the same as connection, that paper could carry what his voice couldn't. It couldn't. But he'd needed to try, and maybe that was enough. The desk stayed empty. The letters stayed on the counter. The house stayed quiet, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. Just still. The kind of stillness that comes after you finally stop running from something you can't outrun anyway. One morning, a week later, he found an envelope in the mailbox, his name on the front. Vera's handwriting. Careful, precise, the same way she used to fold his shirts. He held it for a long time, standing at the end of the driveway, the sun warm on his shoulders, the feeder swaying slightly in the breeze behind him. He didn't open it. Not right away. Not because he was afraid, but because some things don't need to be rushed. Some truths can wait until you're ready to hear them. He carried it inside, set it on the table, next to his coffee, next to the stack of letters that had stopped meaning what they used to. It sat there all day, and when the light started to fade, he finally picked it up again, held it, felt the weight of it, the texture of the paper, the way it carried more than ink. He opened it slowly, carefully, the way you open something fragile. Inside, just a few lines. Short, simple, true. He read them twice, then folded the letter, set it down. It didn't fix anything, didn't change the past or promise a future. But it was enough, because it meant she'd tried too, in her own way, at her own pace. And maybe that's all anyone can do. Try. Show up. Say the thing that's hard to say, even when it's too late to change everything, even when all it does is make the silence a little less heavy. He sat at the table until dark, the letter beside him, the stack across from him, the desk empty in the other room. And for the first time in months, he felt like he can breathe. Elias read Vera's letter in the fading light. It was short, 3 paragraphs, maybe less. Her handwriting smaller than his, steadier, like she'd taken her time, like she'd meant every word. She didn't forgive him. She didn't say she was coming back. But she thanked him for finally saying it, for trying, even if it was too late to change everything. She told him she'd kept 12 of his letters, not all of them, just 12, the ones that felt true, the ones where he'd stopped performing and started confessing. The rest, she said, were just noise, beautiful noise, but noise all the same. 12 mattered. He read that line twice. 12 out of 48. A quarter of his effort. A fraction of his grief. But it had mattered. Not enough to bring her back. Not enough to undo the years of silence. But enough to prove he'd finally shown up. Even when it was uncomfortable. Even when it didn't fix anything. He folded the letter carefully, the same way she used to fold his shirts. Sleeves tucked in, edges aligned, a small gesture of care for something fragile. He opened the drawer beside the table, set the letter inside, next to the spare batteries and the old receipts and things that didn't have homes anywhere else. The weight of the drawer closing felt final, gentle, like the end of a sentence that didn't need punctuation. He didn't write back, not because he had nothing to say, but because some conversations don't need answers. They just need to be had. They just need to exist in the space between two people who tried and failed and tried again. Anyway. The desk stayed empty. The stack of letters stayed on the counter. Evidence of a journey. Proof of a pattern. Broken. He didn't throw them away, didn't burn them or hide them. They were part of the story, not the ending, just a chapter he'd learned to close. Years passed, not many. Just enough for the house to feel like his again, for the silence to stop feeling like absence and start feeling like breath. Noah visited often, brought her own coffee now, sat at the table and told him about her life, her work, her worries. The small things he'd forgotten to ask Vera about. He listened, really listened, not planning what to say next, not waiting for his turn, just there, present, the way he'd never learned to be before. One afternoon, she asked him about the letters. Why did you stop writing them? He thought about it, the way he'd learned to think about hard questions, slowly, honestly, without needing the answer to sound better than it was. I was writing to someone who didn't exist anymore, he said, including myself. Noah nodded, held her coffee with both hands. steam rising between them like something trying to take shape. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Writing them?" "All of it." He looked out the window. The feeder swayed in the breeze. 2 sparrows. No cardinal. Just birds living their small, ordinary lives. "I regret the silence," he said. "The years I spent believing presence was enough. That love could be implied instead of spoken." He paused. The kind of pause that holds weight. "But I don't regret trying, even when it was too late, even when it didn't change anything." Noah reached across the table, squeezed his hand, the same way she always did. Warm, steady. A reminder that some connections don't need words to exist. "You taught me something," she said. "What's that?" "That it's okay to try, even when you're scared, even when you don't know if it'll matter." He looked at her, his daughter, the one person who'd witnessed his collapse and his rebuilding, who'd seen him at his worst and hadn't turned away. "You won't make my mistakes," he said. "Maybe not," she said, "but I'll make my own." She smiled, soft, kind, the way Vera used to smile before the distance grew too wide. "And when I do, I'll know it's okay to say it out loud, because you showed me that." After she left, Elias sat at the table for a long time. The light moved across the floor, slow, patient. Time doing what time does. He thought about his father, about Rowan, about the inheritance of silence, about the pattern he'd almost repeated. Almost, but not quite, because he'd tried. Imperfectly. Late, but he'd tried. And Noah had seen it. She'd carry that forward. Not his silence, his honesty, his willingness to break. Maybe that's all we can do. Break the patterns we inherit. Try differently. Let the people who come after us see that it's possible to change. Even when it's hard. Even when it doesn't fix everything. The letters weren't about love. Not really. They were about learning when to speak, and when to stop, when to hold on, and when to let go, when to perform, and when to just be. The desk stayed empty, and that was okay. The silence stayed, but it didn't ache anymore. It breathed.